Vice President ATIKU ABUBAKAR, former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's a name I believe you all know. It's really a privilege and a pleasure that he's here, and I know you're going to give him a very warm welcome. He's an outstanding personality, not only in the past as a very important person in Nigeria, but in the present, a very prominent and respected figure in the Federal Republic of Nigeria, but even more important, a person who has, even at his age, a sterling future, and a name that will count very much in the decades ahead in Africa. One of the most important countries, not only in Africa, but in the world, a country of 162 and more million people. And Vice President ATIKU is a man who has achieved success at the very top level, not only in politics, but in business. He's an outstanding philanthropist. He's the founder of the American University of Nigeria, and he has a strong and well-deserved reputation for his great generosity towards building education and knowledge society. There's an old African proverb, I believe, that says, it takes a village to educate a child. And of all the African friends I have, the one thing that has always struck me is the deep sense they have of emotional security, because indeed it is the village and the extended family and society as a whole that supports each and every individual. Something that we have all too often lost in Europe and in the West in general. And when you think of it, our guest has supported villages and educational centers in the real sense as a man of vision. Africa is, of course, to all of us a very special place. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to quote great Nigerian Chinua Achebe, who said, people go to Africa, but they confirm what they already have in their heads. And so they fail to see what is there in front of them. This is what people have come to expect. It's not viewed as a serious continent. It's a place of strange, bizarre, illogical things where people don't do what common sense demands. But then he goes on to say that despite these many difficulties, often inflicted by colonialism, what Africa has is a powerful sense of energy, human talent, and ability. I travel to Africa at least once a year, and that's the thing that always strikes me, apart from the beauty, the vast plains, the lush forests, the wonderful oceans, is the powerful energy and determination, enthusiasm and talent of its people. It was Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I believe, who said, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had with them the Bible and we had the land. And they asked us to close our eyes and pray with them. But when we opened our eyes, we had the Bible and they had our land. Africa is, of course, as the center of political gravity moves south and east, not only the center and origin of all the human race. Indeed, anthropologists tell us that when the big trek took place from the first species, the first humans of the species, northwards through Ethiopia and Sudan, they encountered in Europe the remnants of the Ice Age, where people were not yet living in caves. The great civilizations of Africa and their great past and their great kingdoms are something that we need in our ignorance to know far more about. In fact, exotic as Africa is to too many people, it brings to mind what the poet W.H. Auden said in a love letter. He said, I love you, dear. I love you till China and Africa meet. and the river jumps over the mountain, and the salmon sing in the street. Well, Africa and China have already met, and Africa and Europe have already met, and Africa and North America have already met, and South America. Africa is the past, our origin, and Africa is our future. And in that future, there will be, and there is a great need for people of the talent of our guest this morning. That's why he not only has a glorious past, a very generous present and very prominent one, but a very important and needed future. So I ask you all, please, because we are so privileged to have such a sterling guest, for Vice President ATIKU ABUBAKAR, that you all give him, please, stand and give him a very warm welcome. Thank you.
President Mulphy, Your Excellencies, ambassadors here this morning, distinguished diplomats, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you all. Really, when President Mulphy reached out to me, inviting me to come and make some remarks about democracy in my country, I was wondering why, me. But after listening to him in his introductory remarks this morning, I want to concede that Dr. Mulphy is an expert on African studies and African struggles for democracy. Dr. Mulphy, I want to thank you very much for your kind words this morning and for your kind invitation to me to speak to this very, very important gathering. Coming to why should I speak about deepening democracy in Nigeria, I think I can say that I'm one of the few who started struggle for return of democracy into our country in the late 1980s, precisely 1987, when the country was under consistent military dictatorship. And I and others were among the vanguard of young people then trying to get the military out of governance. Of course, eventually we succeeded, but with quite a lot of loss, expectedly, because some of us who started with us died in that cause. And I think they died in a cause that will continue to remember them and to thank them for the supreme sacrifices they made so that our country can be democratic. Let me therefore appreciate the privilege given to me by the president of this institute to address these assemblies of distinguished scholars and diplomats. It is a great honor to be invited to this citadel of knowledge and global reputation. I have just been taken around, and President Mulphy informed me that there are well over 200 international organizations around this place. Imagine the entire global community is surrounded, around this place that you think is small or tiny. A citadel known for its persistence and diligence in sharpening minds, promoting fine ideals and diplomacy, and international relations, and setting the agenda for the debate on democracy and development. Again, Dr. Mulphy, I thank you very much indeed. I also thank the leaders of this great institution for giving me the honor to speak to you about my country, Nigeria, and how the promise of democracy there could impact on its prospects in contemporary, African continent. Obviously, from the introduction of Dr. Mulphy, easily you can place the prominent position of Nigeria in African affairs. This comes at a very auspicious time when Nigeria again is preparing for another round of democratic elections, while the rest of Africa and the world anxiously watch and wait on us to get our act together and lead the continent to its long-awaited destiny. I always like to use this phrase or sentence. Nigeria is well known, but not known well. Tragically, the country has been in international news a lot in recent years, owing primarily to the violent insurgency in the oil-rich Niger Delta, and more recently in northern region of the country. The attention paid to these insurgencies is an indication that the rest of the world considers Nigeria or the affairs of Nigeria important enough to warrant such attention. And there is good reason for that view. Some of you may not know that. One, Nigeria is Africa's most populous country. We heard it this morning in our introductory, with a population of around 170 million. 1 in every 4 Africans live in Nigeria. 1 in every 4 Africans live in Nigeria. In a continent of 54 countries, that is quite significant. Presently, Nigeria is the 7th most populous country in the world, with more than 20% of the world's black population living there. We are a diverse and young country, very young indeed. 51% of the population rural, and over 65% below the age of 40. So almost everybody there is young. We have more than 250 ethnic groups, with over 500 living languages, creating a country of rich and diverse cultures. There are few countries like that in the world. We are also home to 2 main religions, Islam and Christianity, each with a strong presence in different sections of the country and claiming roughly about equal numbers of followers. Because there is no part of the country you will go and find that this part is only predominantly one religion or the other. It's mixed. All these tend to accentuate regional, ethnic, and religious distinctions. This diversity of age, ethnicity, and religion should actually make us stronger. Nigeria has the 2nd largest economy in Africa, with a GDP of $239 billion in 2011. By the standards of Switzerland, which has a GDP of $659.3 billion for a population of less than 8 million, that is a small change. However, Nigeria's GDP is higher than that of the bottom 34 countries combined. We are also the largest crude oil producer in Africa, producing 2.2 million barrels per day in 2012. And the country is a major crude supplier to Western countries, with the bulk, 33% in 2011, going to the United States of America. Again, Nigeria is strategically located in the Gulf of Guinea, which has become a key energy source for the major energy consumers in the world, helping to fuel economic development and lead people out of poverty. Accordingly, events in Nigeria have wider implications for this vital energy source for the world. We are also the second highest destination of foreign direct investment in Africa, after South Africa, with the largest share of the investment going into the oil and gas sector. On the international scene, most of you are internationalists here. I concede that. We have been very active in promoting regional trade and economic cooperation, peace and good governance in Africa and elsewhere. Of course, a number of diplomats will recall the role of Nigeria in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Sao Tome and Principe, several such African countries in that sub-region, where we help to stabilize their democratic processes. Nigeria is the largest African contributor to peacekeeping operations within and outside the African continent. Within and outside the African continent. Those of you who are diplomats here in Geneva know that quite well. The country has also been the main driving force behind the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. This organization has been working on the economic and political integration countries in the West Sub-African region and has contributed immensely to the maintenance of peace in the sub-region. Actually, we have a number of regional organizations in Africa, SADC in Southern Africa, and the Maghreb, and so on and so forth. But the ECOWAS happens to be the oldest and the most politically integrated and also the most economically integrated among all the sub-regional groups in Africa. We have also maintained a leadership role in the African Union since its inception as the Organization of African Unity in 1963. Through a technical aid corps scheme, we have been assisting other African countries in a variety of ways with their economic development and the building of peace and cooperation. Let us, therefore, place the introductory part of President Mulphy's remarks and my own in historical context. As many of you know, Nigeria was a British colony. When we gained political independence in 1960, there was a lot of optimism regarding economic development and the growth of democracy and freedoms. That optimism soon turned into disappointment. This was largely because the nationalist leaders who inherited political power from the departing British failed to manage particularly well the enormous challenges of a new country fashioned out of a multiplicity of nationalities, classes, and faiths. The democratic experiment ended 6 years later when the Nigerian military overthrew the civilian government and imposed military rule. The crisis that followed the first military intervention ultimately led to a 13-month civil war which cost close to 1 million Nigerian lives, most of which were on the losing secessionist side. The military returned power to civilians in 1979, but struck again 4 years later and imposed another round of military rule which lasted for 2 decades, culminating in the general elections of 1999, which saw me first elected as a governor of my state, and then saw me also emerge as the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now listen carefully. The long period of military rule ensured the permeation into the fabric of society of a culture of command and control, intolerance of opposition, disregard for rules and regulations, and utter impunity, which characterized military rule in Nigeria. Indeed, governance and politics became what we term in Nigeria as militarized. Thus, by the time the military was once again forced to hand over power to civilians, this culture of intolerance of opposition, disregard for rules, and impunity had become pervasive virtually across the strata of the society. And to make matters worse, many of those who came into power as politicians, successors to military rulers, were themselves ex-military officers. And my boss was one. I was a strong advocate of his presidency then because I felt we had had such a very long period of military rule, and for the military to have confidence in the next system, we needed maybe a retired military ruler. And particularly, he had good credentials as a military ruler who handed over power willingly to a democratically elected government. I felt, I used the term transitional democracy when I was actually campaigning for him. But really, I don't see eye to eye with the military when it comes to democracy. This was a logical development given the length of time the military had been in power. The wealth that many of them had acquired during their tenure, and the influence the departing military leaders had exercised in selecting and empowering their successors. I want to recall that there was just a small group then in that transition. I think there were 5 or 6 of us. And among the 5 or 6 of us, I was the only bloody civilian the military would call. All the rest, were retired generals. And when I looked around, it was really scary. But despite this military political complex, we saw early democratic gains. Many freedoms were restored to Nigerians: freedom of speech, including speech critical of the government, freedom of assembly, and freedom to organize politically. Our courts also cast aside some of the shackles of an authoritarian justice system and moved towards a more democratic judicial practice. And that was why in the course of my political career, I knew that I couldn't fight the military, but I knew I could also get my distinct freedoms through the courts. And I think I was the highest single Nigerian who ran to the courts for justice. And that paid off. The mass media, which remained resolute under the military, also became less constrained in their work, now less afraid of holding government to account and acting occasionally as the conscience for the society. Here again, unfortunately, we were not able as a country and as a leadership to fully purge ourselves of the former dictatorial military structure and pervasive, insidious corruption that feeds it. Thus, under the civilian democratic dispensation, we continue to see political opposition as the enemy that has to be crushed, rather than patriots as loyal opposition who happen to disagree with us simply because they hold political ideologies and points of view different from ours. I remember when I made a similar remarks at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, where I said the the opposition should not be seen as an enemy to be crushed, but the same patriotic group of Nigerians who hold, I came under fire from my boss. This culture of intolerance best characterized the post-military political era, especially the period after 203, as attempts were made to remove tenure limits of a sitting president beyond the period allowed by the country's constitution. Again, that saw me in the vanguard, of that opposition, even though I was in a government that was to benefit. If that constitutional amendment had succeeded, I could have remained a vice president for life, which I did not want, in any case. Intolerance was by no means directed only at the members of the opposition political parties. Targeted members of even the ruling party were also severely punished for any passive opposition to the sitting president or other executive power holders. The attempt to change the constitution to extend the tenure of the sitting president led to attacks by the presidency against democratic institutions, including the parliament, the judiciary, and even the ruling party itself. These attacks significantly undermine these institutions and their ability to execute their duties according to democratic principles. Despite these democratic failings, there were significant gains on the economic front arising from the transition to civilian democratic rule. These include the stability of the exchange and interest rates, a reduction in the rate of inflation, a reduction in public debt, in fact, almost total elimination of external debt, increases in foreign reserves, privatization of inefficient and costly state enterprises, and an overall improvement in the business environment which enhance the potential for rewards for investors. And incidentally, I happen to have chaired, the economic reform team that implemented all this. However, we were unable to significantly translate these macroeconomic gains into major microeconomic improvements, largely because the politics of constitutional amendments and the accompanying rising level of corruption distracted our government from its economic goals. In a lurid kind of way, the two became intertwined. Desperation to cling to power led to massive corruption, the proceeds of which were freely deployed in an attempt to compromise state institutions such as the judiciary, the legislature, and other critical sectors of the society. That is, the attempt to amend the Nigerian constitution to extend the tenure of the sitting president and the struggles against it became a major distraction and undermine our efforts to significantly improve the well-being of the mass of the people, especially through infrastructure provisioning, employment generation, and improvements in education, health, and other social services. So by 2010, 70% of Nigerians lived below the poverty line, with a maternal mortality rate of 545 deaths per 100,000 live births. Nigeria ranked the second worst in the world in 28 after India. But it is rated worse in absolute terms when the country's population is compared to that of India. We also have 187 deaths per 1,000 live births, a figure which ranks Nigeria as the one of the worst in the world in infant mortality. Life expectancy at birth is 50 years, compared to 82 years for Switzerland. A long way to go. In addition, such preventable diseases as polio and measles continue to spread in the country to utter embarrassment. For a country with which oil revenue, this is completely unconscionable, unjustifiable, and unacceptable. The weakening of democratic institutions has led to further deterioration of governance and rule of law, worsening of corruption, and rising unemployment and insecurity. Officials' figures show that Nigeria's economy is growing by about 6.5% per annum. But the rate of growth is nowhere near what is required to quickly lift millions of Nigerians out of poverty once and for all. In a way, Nigeria's story is Africa's story. Post-colonial Africa has been characterized by military rule and conflicts, corruption, disease, illiteracy, insecurity, famine, and insignificant contribution to world trade. So you can see how Nigeria's story, whether democracy, whether economy, is intertwined with that of Africa and how it can impact on the rest of Africa. Africa is currently experiencing economic growth, the economists say. A welcome departure from the recent past. But that growth is not fast enough to lift enough Africans out of poverty and place the continent on the path of sustainable growth to join the ranks of developed regions of the world. This must change. For Africa to change, and Nigeria can and should lead this change. I think Nigeria has no alternative but to lead that change. Opportunities for change. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, these development challenges facing my country also provide opportunities for change. Nigerians are hardworking, creative, and resourceful. President Mulphy also testified to that. And in spite of the well-publicized and lawful activities of a few, we are largely an honest and law-abiding people. With a median age of 18 years, Nigeria's population is really young and potentially among the most productive on the planet. But our people have been failed far too many times by the poor quality of leadership that has presided over their affairs. A committed, visionary leadership working in concert with a mobilized citizenry and with assistance from friends of Nigeria can change the way issues are handled and turn Nigeria around. We need strong institutions, stable and predictable policy environment, rule of law, and the enabling environment for sustainable economic growth. This will bring the country out of its self-inflicted inertia and enable it to occupy its rightful place in Africa as the harbinger of democracy and economic growth on the continent. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, how the international community can help Nigeria and therefore Africa. Nigeria has enormous promise and acknowledge that it is Nigerians who have to develop Nigeria. It is Nigerians who have to grow Nigeria's economy, make the necessary investments in infrastructure, education, health, and other social services, and secure lives and property. But Nigeria needs help. We are all interdependent. They say the world has turned into a global village. Nigeria needs foreign direct investment. It also needs political help to move along the democratic path and to protect the path of freedom and fair elections. Investments will help to provide employment, enhance people's incomes, and thereby reduce the army of unemployed youth from which criminals and terrorists are being recruited. Switzerland can certainly do more to help Nigeria. The volume of Nigeria's bilateral trade with Switzerland was $500 million as of 2012, up from $250 million in 2010. Nigeria and Switzerland need to grow that trade volume. 50 Swiss companies operate in Nigeria, making Switzerland the 11th highest foreign investor in Nigeria. The stock of Nestle, the giant Swiss conglomerate, is about the highest price stock at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. We need more direct investment by Swiss companies. Huge opportunities exist in infrastructure, manufacturing, oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, housing, food and beverages, and the financial services sector. We also need more of your assistance in fighting corruption in Nigeria by, for instance, stopping money laundering by Nigerian officials and in helping to return funds already laundered here. Nigerians are obviously grateful to the government and the people of Switzerland for returning funds laundered in Swiss banks by the former Nigerian military Sani Abacha. And in fact, I led the negotiation on the part of Nigeria to repatriate some of this money. But we still have about $2 billion stuck here in Switzerland, not returned from the late dictator's load. Equally as important, Nigeria can learn useful lessons from Switzerland, including the transfer of advanced skills and managerial expertise. Excellence in any endeavor helps workforces understand the value of performance and productivity. We certainly can use the precision in your watches, the delicacy in your chocolates, and the prudence of your financial institutions. But the international assistance that Nigeria needs goes beyond economic. Perhaps more important is political assistance, in my own view, because everybody has his own perspectives of, things. Nigeria needs help in deepening its democracy, improving governance, and ensuring accountability and transparency. Switzerland and other friends of Nigeria in the international community can help to persuade and pressure the current Nigerian regime to further open up the political space. Elections include all the processes leading up to the casting of those votes and thereafter, such as enacting relevant legislation, party primaries, equality of access to state media, use of state resources for partisan purposes by incumbents, the independence and neutrality of security agencies, and the election management agency, among other things. If you don't help us monitor and ensure all these processes, then I don't think you are going to see a credible outcome of any electoral process. These processes would need to be constantly and consistently monitored in emerging democracies such as Nigeria. Switzerland and international friends of Nigeria can deepen their assistance to Nigeria's election management agency, the Independent National Electoral Commission, and help pressure the government to ensure that the agency is truly independent. In addition, our partners can help by enhancing their support to pro-democracy civil society organizations as they engage in the difficult and sometimes hazardous task of helping to deepen Nigeria's democracy and holding leaders to account. I strongly believe that as Nigeria changes for the better, so Africa will. In the course of my speech and Dr. Mulphy's introductory remarks, we have seen how Nigeria and Africa, indeed Africa, are intertwined. Given Nigeria's population and the size of its economy, it can help lift Africa economically, and if it lifts it economically, it can also lift it democratically. And it can become a beacon of democracy, good governance, accountability, and transparency for other African countries if it can practice those at home. It would be an example for the rest of Africa and stand on firm moral grounds to diplomatically nudge other African countries down the same road of democratization. Conversely, a collapsed Nigeria will be a threat to peace and stability in all of Africa. Nigeria's descent into increased instability and insecurity will send a flood of refugees that would not only overwhelm Nigeria's neighbors, but also land on their own shores. This bleak future can only be vanquished with the determination of the determined collaboration between Nigeria and the international friends of Nigeria who work relentlessly to sow the seeds of democracy, good governance, accountability, and transparency. Nigeria can change with a committed visionary leadership that is accountable to its people, with increased investment in infrastructure, education, and healthcare, with strong institutions to support democracy and protect our teeming population, and with the cooperation of friends such as Switzerland, Nigeria can fulfill its enormous promise. I leave you today with this reminder from history, to the history yet to be written. To paraphrase Sir Edmund Burke, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for enough people to do nothing. I and many like-minded Nigerians are prepared to do something about this. What of you? Are you prepared to join us in this quest? Once more, I sincerely thank President Mulphy and this great institution for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you. I thank you for your kind attention, and good morning.
How population trends are emerging, what's happening in terms of sociology or social networking, and it's very intelligently done, we think, and I think a man of your intellect and scholarly instincts would appreciate it, so we would like you to have that, sir. Now, you have to be careful not that it doesn't fall out. There's one of these, you would hold it for us. This is a painting done by a father of one of our students. The student was from Sudan, another large country that struggled with divisiveness and so on, with Muslim North and Christian South and so on. And if you'd like to open this, he has called this Darfur. And with your leadership, that is the kind of thing that will not, fortunately, come to Nigeria. So we'd like to present you with this.
Empowering democracy in Nigeria. On your view, what are the three main points to get so, please?
Well, the three main points, I try to convey is, first of all, the need to deepen democracy in Nigeria. And the second point, the impact that will have on the rest of Africa, particularly the West African sub-region, where Nigeria dominates. And thirdly, it is only when you have a stable democracy that you can also expect a sustainable development. So these are the three things I was trying to convey to the audience.
Okay. And second point, why this travel in Switzerland?
Well, you could understand the significance of Switzerland. Dr. Mulphy, in his introduction remarks, said there are over 200, United Nations organizations, bodies situate in Switzerland. I don't think after New York there is any other place where you can have international organizations all located in one place and where your views will have the necessary impact as far as those organizations are concerned.
But are you looking to get some close contact with this UN organization yourself, please?
Of course, definitely. Why not? Because one can exploit, the presence of all these organizations to advance one's own views and ideas, about our country and also about the African continent.
So my last question, you were talking about trade between Switzerland and Nigeria. On your view, what could improve the trading between the two countries?
What could improve is more investment, by Swiss companies in Nigeria. I told you currently Switzerland is 11th, most invested countries in Nigeria. And we will want to see Switzerland move up to number 3, number 2, number 1 in Nigeria. Why not? Because we believe Switzerland as a country has the money to invest, and we have the opportunities for investment in our country.
Thank you. Would you like to add something by yourself?
No, I think it was a wonderful occasion, and I really enjoyed it. Perhaps the only thing I missed was I would have wished to see a question and answer session maybe for about 10 or 20 minutes, but no problem.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Why this invitation to His Excellency here in your school?
Because His Excellency not only has a sterling past, but he is an important leader of the future in Africa, and not only in Nigeria, but he's the kind of leader that Africa as a continent needs. So we like to think in a selfish way that we support those who support democracy and who have the concerns of the people at their heart, as His Excellency does.
And do you think it will be a relationship between His Excellency and the school on the future?
We haven't thought too much about that, but we would certainly hope so. We were tremendously impressed by his speech this morning and his presence. And if anything, he deepened his reputation as a person who cares about the future of Africa as a whole, and that it'd be a fair future and a democratic future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Humphrey, I'm a third-year bachelor student, and I was very pleased to be able to attend this prestigious venue today.
So, on your view, what is coming out of this of the speech of His Excellency for you?
Well, in my formative years as a student, I think it is very important to be confronted with such towering figures, especially from West Africa, that is going to be a very important place in the future. And we are looking to work, as I'm a representative of France and the United States, with regional structures and first and foremost ECOWAS countries. And we were very pleased to have such an interlocutor of choice today.
Do you want to add something?
Yes, I was very inspired, and I think that it is crucial to be able to meet with such a figure of the future, basically. So I was very inspired and very pleased, and I'm thrilled to be here.
My name is Rakesh. I'm doing my master's in international relations. I've been here for the past 3 months.
My name is Emma Stefanovska, and I've also been here for 3 months.
My name is Adnan van der Rasselt. I'm also here for 3 months, and we are actually, Emma and myself, we are a student ambassador of Geneva School of Diplomacy, which is truly privileged to be at.
On your view, what is the main point from the conference you will keep in mind?
It's absolutely the personality of this vice president. It's been a truly honor for our school and for ourselves. I'm very privileged that our students could be here, and therefore we are very, very thankful with. Thank you.
What is the main point you will keep in mind on this speech?
To further deepen the democracy, but what I gathered from this is the importance of transparency as well. So I think that will stay in my mind for some time to come.
Okay, I come with the same question for you.
The thing is that we have been reading about Africa and Nigeria and himself as well. Him being a charismatic personality in Nigeria has been contributing so much to the Nigerian development. Right now, we have been learning that he is going to run for the presidency in 2015, and his speech gave us an idea about how he is going to do, what he is going to do after the election, how he is going to contribute, how he is going to bring up Nigeria as a major part in Africa. And that insight is itself is a very valid information that we could have within ourselves to perceive how Africa is going to go in the future. So the speech was very informative.
Thank you very much.